What is going on, y'all? Welcome to the Mission Ready Men briefing right here on the SHR Media Network. Please let me know if you can or cannot hear me. Something updated and I had to make a change, and so I hope that you all can hear me. But in the meantime, thank you for joining us here on the Mission Ready Men briefing on the SHR Media Network, where masculinity has not been recalled and faith has not been neutered. Today is Tuesday, February 23rd, the year of our Lord, 2026. And this is not just politics. It is spiritual warfare, and suicidal empathy is dressed up as progress. So we're done pretending, we're done pulling punches, and we are not gonna apologize. If you're looking for rainbows and unicorns and participation trophies, you are in the wrong spot, but stick around because you might just learn something. We are no longer governed by law, evidence, or even anything resembling consistency. We are governed, our society is governed by feelings, enforced by vibes, and justified by the narrative. And what's allowed today depends on who you are, how loud you're offended, and whether or not the story feels right. Truth isn't dead, not as long as we're here, but society is it's pending its approval. And we just can't allow that. So buckle up, Buttercup, because the narrative is going bye-bye. So I really didn't want to talk about this, and we're not gonna get into the weeds on it, but we are gonna talk about on a certain level, Don Lemon once again. But not the case itself, at least not completely. We're going to talk about the media narrative and reaction surrounding it. And of course, he was charged based on his conduct, not what he did, and not his alleged job that he claims he was doing. Federal civil rights laws and statutes hinge on participation, not profession, not your job. But of course, within a matter of hours, the media's response pivoted away from the facts. And the press is now treating him, even though when he got fired, if you remember, he was, I don't want to say a pariah, but he was not getting the kind of love that he is getting now. But now they're treating him like a fallen comrade instead of the defendant that he is. And we're not going to get into his guilt or innocence. You can watch the video, you can read the indictment and decide that for yourself. I think anyone with a couple of firing neurons can figure that out. But this is about the institutional reflex to declare him guilty, to declare him innocent, and the establishment to rush to his defense. As soon as the charges dropped, the media's instinct was not finding the truth, it was defense. The first wave of headlines when he was arrested. Journalist arrested. This is an attack on the First Amendment. Press freedom is under threat. Chilling effect on the press. All kinds of madness like that. But there was no focus on the victims. There was no focus on the church. There was no focus on what he actually did, what he's on film doing, the disruption, the statutory basis for the charges that he was indicted on. They didn't focus on any of that. They framed it as symbolic prosecution, not and kind of and Dana Bash talks about this, and we're going to play that here in a little bit, that it was some kind of vendetta against Don Lemon. But no mention at all of the criminal action that actually took place, allegedly. So we're gonna get into that. But the first thing that disappeared in the media coverage was, as I mentioned, the actual crime and the crime scene. And then, of course, the race card was played. Who was it? Acosta and some knucklehead he had on his show claimed that he was targeted because he was Black. That's all they ever have. That's all they ever have, and it's so utterly ridiculous. And it's so old at this point. I mean, it's played out. But this move, what they do, it does three things. It shifts the burden away from the facts and onto the narrative. It pressures the DOJ through, or it attempts to pressure the DOJ through public outrage. And it signals to journalists, alleged journalists, that accountability is optional. And of course, in this space, people like us, people who pay attention to this, push back and understand that journalism is not a shield. It doesn't protect you from your criminal activities. Press credentials are not supposed to suspend criminal law. And when Todd Blanche was on Dana Bash's show, Union, she got into this, and Todd Blanche just basically destroyed her entire argument. So let's get into that. Maybe. Yeah, here we go.
Former CNN anchor Don Lemon and another journalist, Georgia Fort, were arrested on Friday on charges they violated federal law during a tense protest at a Minnesota church. A conservative federal judge, somebody who clerked for Antonin Scalia, already had rejected those warrants and wrote that there is no evidence that those two engaged in any criminal behavior or conspired to do so. Then an appeals court held up that decision. Why did you then bring this case to a grand jury after it already had been rejected by multiple judges?
So first of all, that appeals court, you're not right. The appeals court, a judge on the appeals court said that there was clearly probable cause. There was absolutely probable cause that a crime had been committed. Okay, so it's true that they rejected the mandamus petition, but yes, by Mr. Lemon and others, it's public. And so, yes, you're right. A judge in that court had said there wasn't probable cause. But guess what? Our system doesn't allow judges to make that decision. They can make that decision to get an arrest warrant on a complaint, but only a grand jury can bring forth an indictment. And so that's what we did. We went to a grand jury, which, as you know, are 25 citizens from Minneapolis and around that decide whether there's probable cause. And that's who returned an indictment.
Mr. Blanche, I want to go, actually, I went through the entire indictment, all 29 alleged overt acts of conspiracy. And there's a lot to ask you about, but I'm just going to pick a few here, okay?
Of course, she's just going to pick a few.
Starting with overt act number 20, which says, quote, defendant Lemon told his live stream audience about congregants leaving the church and about a young man who Lemon could see was frightened, scared, and crying. And Lemon observed that the congregants' reactions were understandable because the experience was traumatic and uncomfortable, which he said was the purpose. Overt Act 21 says, quote, as the operation continued, defendant Lemon acknowledged the nature of it by expressing surprise that the police hadn't yet arrived at the church and admitted knowing that the whole point of the operation was to disrupt. Why wouldn't a jury at trial see this as a journalist observing what is happening, which is protected by the First Amendment?
Well, you conveniently left out multiple allegations in that indictment about what else Mr. Lemon did, including surreptitiously avoiding saying where they were going, being part of the planning, being part of the decisions to make sure the police didn't know this was happening and federal law enforcement didn't know this is happening. There are multiple allegations there. And guess what? He gets to have a lawyer and he gets to have a defense. And so if he wants to go forward with the defense that, oh, shucks, I was just a journalist, he can do that.
Oh boy. This is not, and Todd Blanche, he absolutely nailed it right there. And we're gonna get into a little bit more of that clip here in a second. Just the end, a few seconds. I know that was kind of long, but I wanted to get that out there because she did what these so-called journalists always do. They give you a couple of nuggets and leave out some of the most important context out there, and then think they're gonna get you to fall for the trap. And Todd Blanche saw it coming a mile away, and he didn't fall for it, which is why he's out there doing this. But this is not about free speech. This is not about the journalist's First Amendment. This is about participation in a crime. Now, even if he had been involved in the planning, but he had stayed outside and just observed and didn't insert himself into the story, which is what he did, they might not have a case. But he is on film talking about the planning. And I know I said I wasn't going to get into the guilt or innocence, but so I'll just say this. He's on film talking about everything that he's doing. He is on film implicating himself in crimes. And that's why this indictment was brought. Dana Bash reveals herself at the very end of this clip. And I'm going to see if we can find it here. All right.
Official Twitter handle celebrated his arrest with the social media and a
funny.
chain emoji. And it's pretty clear that they're very well aware in the White House of this. I want to ask about Georgia.
No, I didn't say they weren't aware. Wait. Hold on one second.
And they were celebrating
aware.
it. That was afterwards.
You said that. No. You said that President Trump had some vendetta or something against Mr. Lemon. I said I don't know whether he even ever thought of Mr. Lemon. I have no idea.
Yesterday,
You're right.
he called
there
him
was
a sleazebag.
a tweet that went out.
Just so you know, he called him a sleazebag just yesterday.
After his arrest. After his arrest.
Okay. You said a lot of things before that, and it's mutual.
Okay, I missed it, but she basically asked him, "Is this?" And he alluded to it at the end there. She basically asked him if this was a vendetta against Lemon, and of course, it's absolutely not. It is consequences. It is something that the left never seems to actually deal with, and that's accountability. And he's being held accountable. They see themselves as a protected class. They see themselves as the moral authority. And what they really are is they're political actors. They're demonstrably propagandists and activists. And Don Lemon was acting in his journalistic, quote unquote, capacity as an activist. And they see any accountability as an attack on them. And legal scrutiny becomes authoritarianism. And here, I have another clip of somebody that we've talked about on occasion, but I haven't been able to fit her into the shows recently. But this is perhaps one of the dumbest people in media, and also one of the biggest propagandists, leftist propagandists in media. And we're about to watch her get schooled, and it was glorious. Check this out.
Or a journalist, and the indictment obviously suggested that he posted himself at the main door. He prevented people from exiting, but ultimately
No, it does not say that.
The indictment says that.
The indictment absolutely says that, clear as day, which means either she didn't read it or she's lying.
That protesters did that. It names the other people. It did not say that Don did that.
Look, I just want to respond because you accused me of mischaracterizing the indictment. This is actually a quote from the indictment that Lemon posted himself at the main door of the church where he confronted some congregants and physically obstructed them as they tried to exit, challenging them with facts about U.S. immigration policy. So that is what the indictment says. I'm not stating whether I agree with that, but that's what the indictment says. So, look,
They also characterized him as intimidating a pastor who he was calmly interviewing. So I think we also have to, the characterization of him conducting journalism is also something to be questioned.
The question is...
Of course, the characterization is something to be questioned. These people are ridiculous. And she's very clearly just being a propagandist. She is carrying water for the establishment. This isn't about them thinking anything about government overreach or anything about that. This is their fear of my dog staring at me in the window. This is about their fear of equal treatment. They just can't have that. They think they're above it all. This isn't a warning or anything like that to journalists. It's a reminder that you can't just pick and choose which laws apply to you. And this reaction tells us who the press thinks that the law is actually for. And they don't believe it applies to them. All right. I want to pivot to something else that happened this week, and or happened since the last time we were on the air. This Zohran Mamdani, I haven't talked about him all that much since he took office. But Zohran Mamdani is running New York into the ground, and it is happening so much faster than I even anticipated. So much faster. A month in, and there's garbage in the streets. I mean, it's sad. It really is. Only for the people who can't escape and voted the right way. The people who voted for this, I have absolute zero sympathy for them. . But as bad as it is right now, it's about to get worse. Zoran Mamdani appointed Stanley Richards as his corrections commissioner. This is not about redemption. It is about ideology overriding responsibility. Stanley Richards is a formerly incarcerated inmate at Rikers Island, and he is now the corrections commissioner. He is tasked with overseeing Rikers Island, where he was an inmate, which is already under federal supervision due to persistent violence and unsafe conditions. It almost defies description how ridiculous this is, even for someone as bad as we knew he was going to be. I know maybe some people out there did, and you can let me know in the chat if you did, but even I, who had such a low expectation of Mamdani, I'm surprised at how bad it's gotten as quickly as it's gotten there. But let's listen to this, because this is insane.
Stanley will make history in this role as the first ever formerly incarcerated person to serve as commissioner. That achievement is not merely symbolic. It is a testament to the thought and leadership he will bring to every member of corrections staff and incarcerated New Yorkers underneath his purview. And as the former first deputy commissioner for the DOC and the executive vice president of the Fortune Society, that work has long been Stanley's purpose.
When we provide support, when we center our collective work on hope instead of fear, when we see what is best in all of us instead of judging people on the worst thing that they've ever done, when we see our commonality as opposed to our difference, we can achieve the unimaginable.
It would help if he could speak, but I suppose that's too much to ask. He, as they said in the clip, he previously served as the Department of Corrections deputy commissioner for programs and operations, and this comes as Rikers Island is under federal supervision, remediation, due to, as I said, persistent, consistent violence and unsafe conditions, overdoses, staff assaults, unsolved deaths. This is not a fresh start moment. And I would argue that you don't give someone a fresh start as the commissioner of the Department of Corrections when they're a convicted felon. That just seems like a no-brainer. That should be something that they are ineligible for. And I'm guessing that this post doesn't require a background check or anything resembling that, because that just seems disqualifying to me. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. But this is a virtue signal appointment. And pretty much everything that he does at this point is a virtue signal. It's insane. It's as I said, I had a very, very low bar, low expectations of Mamdani, and he has exceeded even that. I mean, It's absolutely crazy to me. Now, I feel terrible for the corrections officers. I know people who served as corrections officers in county and state prisons, and I've heard stories of the craziness that they have to deal with. And that's with commissioners who actually understand and actually want to run the prisons the right way. So I can only imagine what these guys are thinking. And the Corrections Officers Benevolent Association, they put out a statement, and it was carefully worded, and I can guarantee that as nicely as this was put, that the rank and file had slightly saltier things to say. But let's take a listen to this statement. I know it's kind of tough to read, so I'm just gonna read it. Despite the many false narratives that have portrayed COBA as an obstacle to reform, we have been ready, willing, and able to meet and work with anyone as long as they respect the rights of our corrections officers and understand that their safety and security matter. Absolutely. The jails cannot and will not operate as safely as possible if the concerns of our members are brushed aside. It is our hope that Mr. Richards understands that dynamic as he takes on his new role and demonstrates a commitment to putting safety and security before any political ideology. Well, I think we can safely assume that that is not the tack that Mr. Richards is going to take. There's no possible way. There is no possible way. And the only thing I think that is going to save these corrections officers is the fact that it is still under federal remediation. Because as I said, well, think about this. How many convicted felons do you know who have been let out of prison actually appreciate the experience that they went through and have any respect for the corrections officers that they dealt with? I would say what? 1 out of 1,000, if that. And I seriously doubt he's the one, especially if Mamdani appointed him. Think about that for a second. Mamdani appointed him, which means he is aligned politically with Mamdani. Mamdani wants to abolish the police and he wants to close jails. So there is absolutely no way that Stanley Richards is going to be anything but anti-police, anti-corrections. And there is no way that he cares 1 iota for the safety and security of the corrections officers at Rikers Island. And if you think that he is, then I have some beachfront property in Arizona that I'm going to sell you cheap. This is malpractice. And of course, we expected this from Mamdani. And this is not isolated to corrections and isolated to Stanley Richards. Mamdani has a history, albeit a short one, but he has a history of appointing these controversial figures to these posts. It's provocation, it's symbolism, and it's ideology. Think about it. Sia Weber, the director of the mayor's office to protect tenants. She said that home ownership is a weapon of white supremacy, and she made other ridiculous housing policy comments. But she is so radical that even the New York City Council didn't want to confirm her for a planning commission post. Think about that. The New York City Council thought that she was too radical to confirm for a planning commission post. How radical do you have to be in New York City for that to happen? And of course, Mamdani appointed her to a role that doesn't require confirmation. And then there's Ramzi Qassam, New York City's chief counsel. He represented Ahmed al-Darbi, a convicted al-Qaeda terrorist involved in a 2002 bombing, and he's been associated with advocacy for clients in high-profile national security cases. He's a lawyer for terrorists. And he is New York City's chief counsel. So, a lawyer for terrorists in New York City, where terrorists knocked down the Twin Towers. If that is not a giant middle finger to the people of New York, to the country, I don't know what is. And then you got Mysone Lennon, a member of the transition team for public safety and criminal justice, another formerly incarcerated inmate in a post to help shape public safety and criminal justice policy. Are you kidding me? Seriously? And I know I say that with some surprise, and I shouldn't be surprised because, of course, he ran. Well, he tried to rein it back in, but he is notorious for being anti-police. So this is on brand for him. This is absolutely on brand for him. So Stanley Richards' appointment is on brand as well. He is treating these institutions as systems to be disrupted, not stewarded. And anyone who resists is being framed as afraid of change, afraid of reform. But there's a cost to this. The workers lose confidence. Public trust is gone. Public trust is gone. And accountability is, it gets blurred under this moral framing. When every person you hire is a statement, governance is reduced to performance art. It's a repeating pattern with this guy. He absolutely believes that institutions themselves are suspect. Institutions like the police, institutions like corrections, housing. They're all inherently unjust in his worldview. And therefore morally compromised. And so he sees it as his job to so-called right that ship. But of course, his moral compass is shaped by Islam, so there's that. But as a result of this worldview, critics of the system are put in charge of it. And that redefines success in these institutions and these offices as ideological compliance. And of course, when it comes to law enforcement and correction, safety becomes secondary, if not third on the list, if it even makes the list, honestly. This is not, he wants to reform things, but this is not reform by improvement. It's reform by inversion. Everything is turned upside down. And of course, when something goes wrong, which it inevitably will, something is going to go catastrophically wrong. Mark my words. And the blame is going to go everywhere but where it belongs. The blame is going to go to the governor. The blame is going to go to the people. The blame is going to go to the officers who got hurt. The blame is going to go everywhere but inward. You can't fix a broken system by hating it even more. I mean, it's the same philosophy as Obama had. Shocking to Muslims. But it's the same philosophy. Obama said he wanted to fundamentally transform the United States. You don't want to fundamentally transform something that you love. Of course, you always want things to improve, but fundamental transformation means that you don't like it, means that you hate it and you need it to change. And that's the same philosophy that Mamdani has. He thinks these institutions are legitimate, so he's going to govern like accountability is too. He's not staffing a city, he's curating a worldview. And New York is about to suffer the consequences. And that is not going to be pretty. All right, let's take a break and get a word in from our sponsor. And our sponsor for today's show is Carry Girl Gear. Valentine's Day is coming, and if you want to get it right, fellas, head over to carrygirl.com. Bold, stylish t-shirts and accessories that she is absolutely going to love and wear. And time is running out. You still got a little bit of time, but time is running out. And if you don't have the time, go ahead and get yourself a gift card and let her choose. That is an easy win, and you look like a hero. So Valentine's Day is coming up. Make it count. Visit carrygirl.com today. And ladies, if you want to do the same thing, head over to Mission Ready Men, click Shop 7 Armors, and check out all of the great designs over there for the men in your life. And I guarantee you, neither one of you will regret it. Neither one of you will regret it. So head over to carrygirl.com or missionreadymen.com and check it all out. All right, y'all. I am Big E, and you are watching or listening to the Mission Ready Men briefing right here on the SHR Media Network, where you can also catch our great lineup, Sackhead Sean with the Edge of Liberty every Monday and Wednesday at 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Pacific. Jersey Joe, the Reaver of Common Sense, every Monday and Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. And BZ with the Berserk Bobcat Saloon every Tuesday and Thursday at 11 p.m. Eastern and 8 p.m. Pacific. Please like and subscribe and share all these great shows. We have had a massive breakthrough. We've been praying for that, and we've had one. We are, when I last looked, at 937 subscribers. When we first started seeing this growth, we thought we might hit 1,000 subscribers by the spring, but thanks to our great listeners, we could actually hit 1,000 by the middle of this month. So please be sure to keep liking and sharing, and thank all of our listeners for the great growth that we've had. We really, really appreciate it. All right, now back to the briefing. So one of the things that we focus on here, aside from looking at things from a Christian worldview at the Mission Ready Men briefing, is the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment is important for any number of reasons. And the left has been attacking the Second Amendment forever. And there's a reason for that, which we'll get into. But these leftist organizations, and we talked about what Virginia is doing the last time we were on, and Virginia is straight gutting the Second Amendment. And we're not really going to get into a lot of what they're doing right now, but there's stuff to get into that we will next time. But Giffords at Second Amendment, anti-Second Amendment group, started by Gabby Giffords. They put out this ad, and we're gonna play it, and then we're gonna talk about it, because it is, for people who don't pay attention, for people for whom the Second Amendment is not important, people for whom the Constitution is not important, when you hear this, or when they hear this, they might think it sounds reasonable. They might even think it sounds constitutional, but let's take a listen.
I'm Katie Fox.
I'm Eric. My name is Michael Howard.
Daniel Garcia.
I'm a retired police officer.
I'm a survivor of gun violence and a gun owner.
I'm a retired federal law enforcement officer, and I'm also part of
Gifford Gun Owners for Safety.
This weekend, a lawful gun owner, Alex Preddy, was killed by federal agents in Minneapolis.
Despite having a valid permit and not threatening anyone.
As responsible gun owners, we knew our rights include the ability to peacefully assemble and the right to legally possess a firearm in accordance with state law.
Okay, hold up. The Second Amendment does not say that. Let's listen to that again.
And the right to legally possess a firearm in accordance with state law.
Where did they get that? Where did they get that? In accordance with state law. And as I said, for somebody who is not paying attention, who is not involved in the Second Amendment, who guns are not important to them for whatever reason, they might hear that and think, yeah, that sounds reasonable. That's in the Constitution, right? Wrong. Absolutely wrong. And we don't even need to hear the rest of that dribble. But what that does, what that message does is flip the entire script of the Bill of Rights. It's a confession. It is a confession that they don't really see the Second Amendment the way it's meant to, because they see the Second Amendment. They see rights in general, not just the Second Amendment. They see rights as something you need permission to exercise. They see all rights that way. Rights pre-exist government. And I wrote about this in my Second Amendment piece that's up on shr.com or shrmedia.com. John Locke argued that individuals possess natural rights to life, liberty, and property. And those rights exist prior to any form of government. They don't originate from government. They don't originate from rulers. They don't originate from institutions. They are inherent to us as human beings. And government, excuse me, especially this government, sees itself as something, they see themselves as defining liberty, even though it's supposed to restrain itself. The Second Amendment does not grant gun ownership, does not grant the right to gun ownership. It recognizes the right. It protects that right. And Gifford's framing redefines that completely. It turns it on its head. It says that state law defines the right. And then the Constitution becomes optional or conditional. They don't believe that rights limit government. They believe that government defines rights. And they couldn't be more wrong if they said 2 + 2 = apple. In accordance with state law. What that statement does is transform the right into a privilege that can be licensed. And licenses, as we all know, can be delayed, taxed, denied, and revoked. And once you accept that, that right only exists at the discretion of the bureaucracy. This is regulation by exhaustion, exhaustion, not public safety. If the government decides when you can exercise a right, you don't have a right. It's that plain and simple. And these gun control freaks, they've gotten some consultants that have taught them how to use constitutional sounding language so that they can appear moderate. And we see how that's working out in Virginia. Spanberger ran as the sober-minded moderate. And from day one, she just went off on a leftist tangent. And like I said, we'll probably talk about all of the things. I know we've talked about it before, but it's gotten worse. But they use this language to appear moderate. And they've managed to avoid recently language that suggests outright repeal of the Second Amendment. And it shifts culture and the courts towards acceptance of a permission-based liberty, which is not real liberty at all. And they've applied this framework to speech. Remember the Disinformation Review Board? They apply it to religion. They apply it to assembly. Remember the emergency powers? They apply it to everything. Now, the Second Amendment has been the hardest for them to neutralize, even though it should at this point be, we shouldn't have to be fighting this hard to preserve the Second Amendment at this point. It should be a done deal, but here we are. But and they accuse the right, they accuse conservatives of being authoritarian, but every authoritarian movement starts by redefining rights as privileges. And the framing in this ad by Giffords, it allows them to claim and feign respect for the Constitution while the state controls their eligibility, the state controls the timing, and the state controls access. And they want the optics of liberty without the inconvenience of an armed citizenry, because an armed citizenry is impossible to control. And we say this almost every time we're together. The left is all about power and control. That's it. Power and control and money. And if they have the power and control, they can get the money. Just ask Nancy Pelosi. But the Second Amendment is unique in this respect, in that it limits the state's monopoly on force. It creates a citizenry that can't be completely coerced or controlled. And think about all the regimes that have disarmed their citizens. That disarmament never, ever once preceded more freedom, more liberty. What came after that disarmament was death. Hundreds of thousands to millions. And I have another Second Amendment piece up on shrmedia.com that talks about that goes into all of the different regimes that took away the guns and then proceeded to kill its citizens. Well, Biggie, come on, they would never do that. This is the United States. You're talking about the left who has admitted to being in favor of re-education camps for conservatives. Do you think that would really stop at re-education? Come on, don't be naive. This ad that I talked about, it wasn't said by some fringe lunatic. You could argue they're lunatics, and I won't disagree with you. But it came from a nationally influential organization that has shaped laws and brought litigation. The language that they used in this ad becomes precedent, will become precedent. If we allow it to, it will seep into the culture. And eventually it will become accepted as legal. Think about all of the things that have happened recently that even 10 years ago, you would have said, if somebody said them to you, you would have been like, you are insane. And yet, here we are. The question isn't just about guns. It's whether Americans remember the difference between liberty and permission. Because once you accept the idea that you need permission for one right, then you've surrendered them all. You surrendered them all. The Second Amendment exists to restrain the state, and anyone who forgets that has already chosen the wrong side. All right, y'all, we got about a half an hour left, a little more, and I want to get into this, and this might take us all the way to the end. It might not. We'll see. We'll see how long-winded I get. We are in, as I say this every time we're together, that we are in spiritual warfare. And a lot of people, Christians included, are pretending that this is not happening. And children are not growing up right now in a neutral culture. The modern West is not post-Christian, it's anti-Christian. Faith is labeled as bigotry, biblical morality is labeled as hate, and obedience to God is framed as oppression. And this is not accidental by any stretch of the imagination. It is intentional. And we can go all the way back to the Frankfurt School and how all of that has shaped schools and entertainment, social media, institutions. They all preach this same line. Parents are obsolete, authority is abuse, and Christianity is the enemy of progress. It's the cultural Marxism playbook, and they are running it step by step. And the data confirms this. I mean, 70% of Christian kids abandon their faith by college. And it's not rebellion. Well, it is rebellion, but not really. It's successful discipleship by the culture. And scripture has warned us, 1 Peter 5:8, be sober-minded, be watchful. The enemy prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. The enemy and the left, they play the long game. And if the children are captured, then they don't need the parents. Because if you don't disciple your children, the culture will, and they will not ask your permission. This is nothing new. It has happened before. It has continuously happened. Christianity has never thrived by blending in. We're not called to blend in. The early church didn't negotiate with Rome. They built a parallel civilization, and Christians, we as Christians were called to be set apart from the world. Romans 12:2, and do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is good and acceptable and the perfect will of God. And parents need to keep that in mind. Polycarp, and this I could talk about this I could do a whole show on Polycarp, but he was a personal disciple of, I believe, John, and he was a bishop in Smyrna, which is now modern day Turkey, and he chose death over denying Christ. Roman authorities captured him and told him to renounce his faith, curse Christ, and they let him go. He was 86 years old. And his response was, 86 years I have served him. He had never done me wrong. How then can I blaspheme my king who has saved me? That level of faith, it doesn't just happen. It doesn't just happen. It is formed and cultivated. What our ancestors understood and modern culture has forgotten. Faith is not inherited, it's transmitted. Sunday religion produces cultural Christians. The people who go to church on Sunday, hungover from spending Saturday night in the club. But total transformation produces martyrs like Polycarp. And the pattern of success of this is historical. Early Christians educated at home, worshiped communally, lived counterculturally. American settlers integrated scripture into their education, into literacy, labor, history, and identity. They didn't raise nice kids. They raised men and women who could endure persecution without falling apart at the slightest microaggression. Every generation that survived tyranny did it by raising children who belonged to God before they belonged to the culture. And the question isn't whether your kids are being shaped. The question is who is holding the mold. And so there's a way to overcome this. Parents should be leading, not outsourcing. You can't delegate discipleship to schools, churches, youth groups. This is a role that is scripturally assigned to the family, especially especially fathers. I say all the time, get your kids out of government schools. The late great Vadi Bosham said that we cannot continue to send our children to Caesar for their education and be surprised when they come home as Romans. So building their worldview around scripture, not feelings, where every question becomes a theological one. Suffering is an opportunity for redemption. Work, framed in the creation order. Hard work and rest. Some of us are not very good at the rest part, admittedly. And our identity, made in the imago Dei, the image of God. Proverbs 1:7, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Without fear and recognition of the Lord, knowledge collapses into confusion. And we are seeing that every day in this country, every day in the world. So as parents, we need to establish daily patterns and rhythms that form an instinctive faith, prayer, scripture, worship woven into daily life, to where faith becomes a reflex rather than an accessory. And one of the biggest things, stop pretending that public institutions are neutral. They are not. I said this before. I've said this a few times, and I'm going to say it again. 8 hours of secular indoctrination a day will always overpower 1 hour of devotion. There are 168 hours in a week. Your kids are in those government indoctrination centers for 40 hours, at least. That leaves 128 hours where your kids are available. And 8 hours a day out of those 128 hours that's 56. So that leaves 72 hours that your kids are either are not asleep or in the care of someone who hates you and hates them. So then if both parents work, kids get home from school, spend 15, 20 hours or more in daycare a week. So that leaves 52 to 57 hours, a little more than 2 days, where they're in your care. And that's the weekend. And so the weekends, your kids are out playing, you're doing stuff, whether it's catching up on work or doing stuff around the house. So when you break it down that way, your kids spend infinitely more time in the care of and being taught by people who hate you and hate them and hate this country. And so we have to seriously evaluate education as a spiritual as well as an academic environment. And another thing that our parents and our parents' parents taught that seems to have gotten lost is reframing hardship and opposition. Persecution is not failure, it's confirmation. 2 Timothy 3:12 says, "Indeed, all who desire to live a godly life in Christ Jesus will be persecuted." But if we teach them in the way that I just laid out, that guarantees that they'll be able to resist. There's a meme that I've seen going around talking about homeschooling. And it says, if you homeschool your kids, they won't fit in society. Exactly. That is the point. They shouldn't. Society is a cesspool, and you don't want them fitting in. You want them standing out. You want them set apart. You're not raising your children to be comfortable in Babylon. You want to raise them to be faithful in it. It's not about, raising kids is not about safety. It's about strength, your strength, and imparting strength into them. And we've gotten to a point, and it's not just with children, but just in general, we've gotten to a point where comfort is the be all and end all. And all that does, people get comfortable and they want to continue being in that comfort. And that produces conformity. But conviction produces leaders. Civilization doesn't fall in a single generation. It collapses when parents, mainly fathers, stop forming sons and daughters and lets the world do it. And the enemy knows this. The enemy knows this. That's why he targets the kids first. But when parents raise biblical thinkers, courageous believers, and spiritually disciplined families, they don't just preserve faith, they advance the kingdom. Proverbs 27, the righteous who walks in his integrity, blessed are his children after him. That integrity blesses generations, not just those individuals. So you're either going to raise warriors for Christ, or the culture will raise them, and the culture will be their replacement for God. There really isn't a third option. All right, y'all. I actually got through that a little quicker than I anticipated. There were a couple of things that of course. I was just looking at some comments. But there were a couple of things that happened this week that I really wanted to also talk about. I wasn't sure if I'd have the time. But this right here, the Grammys happened, I guess, over the weekend. And of course, just like every other award show, it was a political rally, anti-ICE rally, all these empty-headed celebrities, quote unquote celebrities, spewing their nonsense, dropping F-bombs on stage. But there was one artist that stood out. And let's just take a listen to what he had to say.
I know they're going to try to kick me off here, so just let me try to get this out. First of all, Jesus, I hear you and I'm listening, Lord. I am listening, Lord. Second of all, I want to thank my beautiful wife. I would have never changed my life without you. I'd have ended up dead or in jail. I'd have killed myself if it wasn't for you and Jesus. I thank you for that. I thank you for my label, Broken Bow, Country Radio, baby. What's up, dog? Oh, Republic, John Manili, we did it, baby. There was a time in my life, y'all, that I was broken. That's why I wrote this album. I didn't think I had a chance, y'all. There was days that I thought the darkest things. I was a horrible human. There was a moment in my life that all I had was a Bible this big and a radio the same size and a 6x8 foot cell. And I believed that those two things could change my life. I believed that music had the power to change my life and God had the power to change my life. And I want to tell y'all right now, Jesus is for everybody. Jesus is not owned by one political party. Jesus is not owned by no music label. Jesus is Jesus, and anybody can have a relationship with him. I love you, Lord.
I wanted to play that because I'm actually surprised they let him go on that long, honestly. Because as we talked about in this culture that we're in, that is unheard of. It doesn't happen. I'm really surprised that they let him go on that long. And if you notice, they didn't show anyone in the crowd really except for Reba. Because from what I read, pretty much everyone in the crowd was not ready to hear that. They didn't want to hear that. And of course they don't want to hear that. But of course, Reba grew up as a Christian, so she appreciated it. But that's it. And I appreciate Jelly Roll for that because he's not being conformed to this world. He's being set apart from it. And in this culture, that's refreshing. And say what I don't know Jelly Roll personally. I don't know that he is, I have an idea. People will say that he's just playing an act, he's playing a part, whatever. I find that a little hard to believe for the simple fact that you don't get up on national television in front of hundreds, if not thousands of people in the room who are diametrically opposed to that worldview and do that if you don't really believe it. So there's that. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. But like I said, that takes courage. Nobody's going to pay him to say that. So in that environment, with all that obvious opposition, nobody's going to pay him to say that. So if he is pandering, well, he'll have to deal with that with his maker. But until something happens, I believe him. I mean, he spent all that time in jail. Like he said, Jesus is for everybody. He can be saved just like the rest of them. So we'll see. We will see. All right, y'all. That's going to do it for us. We're gonna go ahead and wrap it up. I do want to remind you to head over to shrmedia.com, click on support SHR Media, and click on the shop, and check out the new designs that we have in the shop. You know, let's take a look at it real quick. The official SHR Media shop. So head over there, like I said, click on support SHR Media, SHR Media shop. and check out this. It is a limited run, a 250 reasons shirt, 250 reasons to read source documents in honor of the 250th birthday of this great country. And of course, we have all the other shirts for all of our hosts here on SHR Media. You got BZ's shirt, a conservative Sherpa. We got the Reaver of Common Sense, and of course, the Edge of Liberty, SHR Media logo shirt, a camp mug, hoodie. Please head over there and check it all out. You can view the full collection. And that will bring you over here to the SHR Media shop, where you can see everything in more clarity. But yeah, please head over there and check that out. We would love to have you represent, since you're all such great listeners. Represent SHR Media. We would love to have you on board, and definitely check out the limited shirt. The 250 reasons shirt, I believe there's only 100 available. So be sure to check that out. Don't miss it. All right, y'all, that is it. I'm glad you were here with me today. We are not just here to opine. We're not just here to run our mouths. We are here to equip Christian men, spread the gospel of Jesus Christ, and carry the banner of faith, freedom, and hope for future generations. If any of what we said here matters to you, please don't just watch, share it, bring another man into the fight. And if you want to wear what you stand for, like you just saw, head over to missionreadymen.com, hit Shop 7 Armors, check out all the great designs we have there about bold faith, true grit, and unapologetic patriotism. And remember, when seconds count, the police are only minutes away, but the Lord is right there with you. So keep your prayers going up and your head on a swivel. God bless.